I'll try to make it brief. It's kind of hard to talk about your whole life, in a short time to cover things. Maybe that would be interesting, maybe not. I have some no-dose tablets here. Lots more before we start. And if any of you would like to leave at any time, free welcome to do that. Okay, I'll start out with my birth. I was born July 15th, 1921, in the town of Friend, Nebraska. Population 1,200, elevation 1,200. And
You're not getting mixed up.
some 70 years later, the town is still the same population.
Wow.
And hopefully the same elevation. It's a small town, located in the southeastern part of Nebraska, about 40 miles from the state capital, Lincoln. And our motto of the town, which I don't know who invented or made up, I've known it all my life, is a friend from friend is a friend.
That sounded good.
We have had for many years, there are many postcards, and this is written on that. A friend from friend is a friend, and the state map is drawn on it, and then a little star where friend is located, and you can feel that, after your relatives or others in friend Nebraska. I grew up, my dad was a rural mail carrier for 44 years. He was one of the first rural mail carriers. He delivered mail for 12 years with a horse and buggy. This goes way back. And I have pictures of him with his horses and his buggies, and then later the Model Ts. And then on the Model A's, and then the V8s, and on down the line. My mother was a housewife, as all women were in those days. She looked after the home and after the cooking and taking care of us. I had a sister and two brothers, older than I. I was the baby of the family, and unfortunately all of my family had gone. My mother and dad, my sister, and my two brothers. And I remember in school, when I started school, and I was looking at these old pictures the other night, and we had a little elementary school over here, and a big two-story high school building. We went the first 4 years at this elementary school building, and then we went over to start the 5th grade in the big building. And it's strange how you remember people in your life. I imagine all of you do, at different ages. People to this day I remember so very well, and I remember how important those people were in my life, really. Because if you remember a person that well and how good they were to you, it must have meant an awful lot. I don't remember kindergarten, first grade, or second grade, or any of this. The first grade I remember was the 3rd, and my teacher's name was Miss Weber. And she was a wonderful person. And I can look back, I can remember enjoying school. And spelling, arithmetic, and geography, and she was such a wonderful person. And I think that people like that, God has certainly sent them to us. That they can teach us the proper ways and the love of doing things. And in 4th grade, I had a teacher by the name of Miss Larkin, and I hated her. One day I was out on the school grounds. I think this was the beginning of my hate. I'm going to use the word. I said a bad word, and I don't know what it was. But she took me into the boys' lavatory, and on the wall of the sinks he has a little bottles with soap. I had to put the soap in my mouth and rinse it around before I could rinse it out. And so I didn't like Miss Martin very well. And of course she worked some other things. So I got through the 4th grade and I thought, boy, here I'm going to the big building, 5th and 6th grade. We had it in the same room with the same teacher. Who was promoted to the 5th and 6th grade? Miss Martin. And well, I guess we got along all right. You know, there were different things that came up with this. She, at one time, of course, I was left-handed. My penmanship was terrible. You know, left-handed person trying to do circles, you know, like a right-handed person can do. You can't do that left-handed. Make it look good. So she insisted I write with my right hand. And it upset me. It upset me a lot. And so in the evening, in our home, we do our homework. And if it were in the wintertime, we would be in the kitchen. We had a large kitchen table. And my dad was always there, and my mother, and my brother and I. And I'm sitting over there trying to do this penmanship right with my right hand. And my dad noticed and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to learn to write right-handed." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because Miss Martin wants me to." He says, "No, you're left-handed. You don't write with your right hand." The next day he was at school, and I didn't write anymore with my right hand. So these are the things that I remember. Why? I don't know. But I can remember from the beginning of time of being in church. I thank God so many times for the way I was brought up. My mother, my dad, were Christians in the church. From the time I can remember, I don't know what year, we were in the church every Sunday. My dad was active in the church. My mother was active in the church. We had a good church. We had an active church. We had ministers that I liked very well. Very well. Our senior pastor was a wonderful man. And our associate was actually a Presbyterian minister. This was in a congregational church. You can call that any difference, I guess, between the Methodist, Congregational, and Presbyterian. But he was an ordained Presbyterian minister, and I guess this is the only place he could get a job in. So that's why he was there. He was a young man. At the time he came, he was 27 years old, and he was bald. You know, little over here. But a wonderful young guy, a wonderful voice, singing, and of course he had charge of all the youth groups and different things that we done. And I can remember so many things that we done together that was really fun. We made it interesting. We made it fun. But I think that I don't remember. I can remember as a young boy in the summer they would have different people come for a series of evening services. You know, that would last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They were called evangelists, I guess. I don't remember where these people came from. There were 2 sisters who came one summer, and I can remember it so well. They sang, had beautiful voices. They sang together. They preached, and I can remember going to those things. And I don't remember at any time in my life of me coming to a point where someone said to me, "Do you accept God, as your Savior?" But I probably did those things. Maybe when I joined the church or whatever. But I don't remember the time ever happening like that. When you're surrounded with your mother and dad and family who are so active in doing things, I guess it's just something, you go along with. It's just something that we were supposed to do, I guess. I never felt at any time really in growing up in those years that I didn't want to go. I know when about the time I was 12, 13, 14, I had begun in music. We had a Sunday school orchestra, about an 8, 10, 12-piece orchestra, and all the classes would be. And then at the end of that half hour, we would have our worship service, in a big room, and our orchestra would play. It would be the piano and the guitar, we didn't have guitars in those days, but we had an orchestra. And that was part of our family. My mother played piano, my sister played piano, my oldest brother played piano, I played piano, my other brother played trumpet, I began on trumpet. And all our life, our home was music, singing hymns, any kind of music. It was every Sunday afternoons, if the dinner was there after church and our family was there in the afternoon for 2 or 3 hours, we were singing the music all day. So it was a time that I can look back on, and it seemed good fun. My dad could not carry a tune. He sang off key. And all the rest of us, were musical, trained. And he never stopped him from singing. I can still see him with a hymn book there, and boy, it was terrible. I hope these people over here can't hear you guys. Anyhow, when I was young, we were poor. Everybody was poor in the 20s and in the 30s. So you didn't know any difference. We were well clothed, we had plenty to eat, but these were tough times, They were tough times. My dad had a job, a regular job. But my uncles and people I knew, they worked when they could get work. There wasn't work. It was in a farming area, a farming community. And so, of course, as young boys, we were looking for work in the summer times. I had for maybe 4 years in a row, my brother and I and 4 other fellows were hired by the sexton at the cemetery, and we'd mow the cemetery, and we get 25 cents an hour. It would take us 2 days to mow the cemetery, and this was with hand mowers, You didn't have a ride-along deal or a power. This was hand mowing, but it would take $16, 6 of us, $16 to mow it. And we had 25 cents an hour. I had regular lawns in that area that I mowed, and I was paid 20 cents. These were big lawns. They were little 20 by 30 like you have today. They were very, very large lawns. And but 20 cents was a lot of money. And I had a couple of regular customers that I washed their car on Saturday at 50 cents each washing the car. And I could pick up $1, real easy on Saturday. And one summer, I think I was 16, around 16, the high school had burned in the wintertime. The school caught fire and it just gutted the whole building. So in the summer, a contractor was there to demolish, all of the building, and they were going to get ready to build a new one. And I knew the man who was the contractor, and what they were going to do was knock all the walls down and everything, and then hire people to clean the brick and stack the brick, to save the brick to sell or use or whatever. And we paid a penny a piece for each brick. You had to chip off the mortar and stack it, And if you worked hard through the day, you might get 100, 150 brick. That was $1, $1.50 a day. So anyhow, the work was going along, and I was getting a little tired of chipping bricks, and my hands were a little bloody, and I didn't even think we had gloves. So one day he tells me, you're going to go over and work with this crane operator. And this was a guy that had the big ball, and crane, and he'd slam in and knock the walls in and put cable around places and pull it loose, And of course, I didn't know what I was doing. He said, he'll tell you what to do. So anyhow, the basement, we had a basement in the school, full basement. And then there were basement windows that had a concrete arch like this. There was a pit on the outside, let the light down in there. And so the guy told me, he says, go over and climb up on that top of that window, the concrete, and put the cable around, and hook it. And then when we get down, then I'm going to pull it in. Pull the wall in. And so, okay, that was easy enough. So and then we only like 4 foot from the ground on this side, on the wall, but it's like 15 feet to the basement down this way. So I shimmied up on the curvature there and put the cable, reached down with the cable to put it around, and the next thing I knew, the wall was going in, and I went in with it. And the whole wall came in on top. And it took them half an hour on this to sort of dig me out. So usually what, you'd say, well, I don't want to have a jump, back in those days. It was very serious. I easily could have been killed. After they got to me and dug it out, the heavy part of that concrete, which weighed about 250 pounds, it just grazed my head. It took the hair and skin and everything off. If it had been over an inch farther, that would have been the end of it. So they hauled me into the hospital, and I had a skull fracture and a brain concussion and a broken foot, and my whole body was just black and blue from the bricks, hitting me. The worst part of it was I had a pinched facial nerve in here. My face was paralyzed, this side. And of course I'm laying here and I'm hurting, and I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea. Had my leg in a cast, had me wrapped up with some bandages. And later I found out they called in a brain specialist. And after about 2 weeks I was laying there, and I got this pain, like a toothache, jabbed in, like pain. And I called the nurse, and I said, I have a toothache. He says, where does it hurt? And I said, well, it's jabbing right in here. And he called the doctor in right away, and he examined me, and a big smile on his face. He said, you're lucky some more in this earth today. He said, that jabbing is not your tooth, it's the facial nerve. He said, it's been pinched, and now it's coming back. So, to kind of find out I was underage to be working on the job. But the contractor was a good friend of my dad's. And he told me, he said, don't worry about the medical bills or any part of this. He's going to be covered, So I hobbled around for a month, I guess, on crutches, everything come back together. was just another part of it.
Is that, you enjoyed that so much? That falling and the breaks and everything, that's why you got into construction?
Well, that's another story, Jim. I didn't plan on getting it. I had a high school teacher, I think we all have had high school teachers that we remember well, and we liked. I had one in high school, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. His name was Mr. Serby, and he taught history, geography, and news radio. And they were my three favorite subjects anyhow. And he was a wonderful guy. And I became editor of the school paper, writing sports, football games, and all of this, and I liked it. And he encouraged me, to continue on this. And he encouraged me to, if I was going to college, to think about majoring in journalism and writing. I love sports. I love them very much. And it's easy, when you love something, it's easy to write about it. And so when I finished high school, I entered the University of Nebraska, and I was going to be a sports writer. And so a year there, and then all of a sudden it was summer, and I've never been anywhere other than Colorado and Iowa. And I thought, gee, I'd like to go out to California to see the ocean and see some country. So a cousin of mine came out, and he ended up in La Jolla. And I can remember the day when the first day we got here, we were standing down in the park, down in the cove. That maybe if your first impression of San Diego or the ocean was like mine, it was like heaven on earth. There was these beautiful palm trees and the ocean and the grass, and it didn't look like Nebraska at all. It was much cooler, and the best weather blowing.
What year was that, Jeff?
1941. August 1941. And so I thought, well, maybe, gosh, I've been in school a long time now. Maybe I'll just take a break, a semester break, and I'll get a job, stay here a semester, and then go back to finish school. Well, December 41. Happened 2 months after I got here, so that kind of changed my plans, and I stayed here in 1942. I had a good friend here, and he loved horse racing, and I did too, and so time was going along, and we knew we were going to go into service, so he said, well, why don't we just have one big trip, one last trip, and then we'll be going into service. So let's go back to Louisville, Kentucky for the Derby, the big horse race. So we did. We drove back there, and I intended to come back to Nebraska and then stay. But I ended up coming back to San Diego, was here about 2 months, then I went back. And I was undecided about the service. I really didn't know what I wanted. And one day I was in Omaha, and I was walking down the street with a friend of mine, and I looked up, and there was an office, join the Marines. And I said, why not? Why don't we go in and see what's going on? So we ended up, with our name on the so the guy, I wanted to fly, I wanted to get into aviation. And the guy says, oh, that won't be any problem. He says, when we'll send you out and you go through boot camp. And he said, then you have a choice of you have all these opportunities, and you can choose what you want to what do you want to go into, you know, and you'll be there. I said, well, that's great. So I came out, we went through boot camp, and after boot camp, they had this opening for radio man in flying. So I go to take this examination. There were 8 openings in the school. There were 400 taking the examination. And a lot of these guys had been in the radio and were hams and all this, and I didn't have a chance. So anyhow, we finished boot, and they give you an opportunity, you know, to request something, you know. So they were opening this deal for paratroopers. You know, I thought, well, that'll be fun, you know. Maybe I can at least fly. So I go in halfway into the paratroopers. Training ground was out at Camp Gillespie in Oklahoma. That's where the training was. They had jump towers there and everything. They took them down like 10 years ago, I think. They took this jump tower down. But, so according to, you know, well, I lied to get into the Marine Corps in the first place. In the accident I had, I ruptured this eardrum, you know, and I guess it still wasn't 100% because when I was going through for my physical, the doctor was looking in there and he says, wow, I better put some drops in there and said, God, he says, you go and sit down a while and then we'll take a look at that ear. And I thought, oh man, I'm not going to make it. So I'm sitting there a while, this other doctor comes along. He says, what are you sitting here for? And I said, well, the doctor just told me that he wanted to put some drops in my ear, told me to sit down. And he says, was your ear okay? And I said, yeah. He says, well, go ahead. So anyhow, in order to go to paratroops, you had to say, well, I've never had a broken bone in my body, you know, or any fractures or anything like this. Well, as I grew up, I skipped that earlier. I had a trick knee. I don't know what a trick knee is, but it used to pop out a joint when I was a kid. And I'd be playing football or something, and the knee would go out. Well, sometimes you just kick it, you know, and pop it back in. Sometimes I had to go to the doc and have him do it. And so I didn't say anything about my knee. And we're going through and when you went out there that training, boy, that was rough. You didn't walk anywhere, you ran. You ran everywhere you ran. And we're going out over these obstacle courses, you know. The one where you climb the wall of the rope, flip over and come down, it's about 18, 20 foot. As I flipped over the thing, my foot caught the rope and I come straight down right on that knee. And so that was the end of the paratroops. I went back to the police. And I thought, well, they'll discharge me. You know, I've got a banged up leg, but the x-rays, well, that's okay. So they shipped me into a hospital out of Little Camp Linda Vista, which was directly east of where Miramar Naval Air Station is today. It was a tent camp. Big next to the old Camp Elliott there. And this was called 1st Corps Motor Transport Battalion. And the idea of the war at that time, the reason they were constructing this transport battalion, the Marines didn't have any transport battalion or anything like that. And as I learned later and read in the books that the war, instead of island hopping, you know, from Guadalcanal on up, they were going to go to India and come up through China and Japan. So that was the reason for this transport battalion. We had jeeps and recon trucks, 4-wheelers. We had 10-wheelers, you know. And I never driven a truck in my life, but I sure learned how to do it. And so there's a long story about that without getting into it. But anyhow, we ended up shipping out, you know, in March '43. went to recounting, which was a rural area. From there we moved up to Guadalcanal. And the action was over there, but they were bombing every night. I was in on
What
the
division
landing in Guam and the landing in Okinawa. Then we left there, went back to Guam. I ran into my brother in Guam. He was with the 3rd Marine Division. He'd been in Iwo Jima. And I knew where he was, from the letters and things. And so I went down to see him. And, like, a week later, we dropped the bomb, and it wasn't over. And, well, everything was a point system, overseas, somebody wants, we get so many points for this, so many points for this, if you had this many points, you were on your way home, which we had 15, 20 points more than what was required. So, they told us to break camp. We were going, and they put half our outfit aboard ship. And they pulled them off. They loaded us on LSMs and took us to China with the 1st Marine Division. We were supposed to go in there and disarm the Japs and get them back on the boats and send them home. The war was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. I did a lot of praying, and all the time that I've gone up to this time and through my life, I always had prayer and I always had belief. One time we had a worship service on the ship at sea, and now it's the Protestant religion, worship service. About, so there's about 40, 50 guys there. This lieutenant, but she's supposed to lead the service. And he stood up and he says, "Is there anyone here who would like to offer a prayer?" Everything's kind of, he said, we had a prayer, and somebody read a few verses in the Bible, and we sang a hymn, and that was it. But, I never had, at this time, when this was mentioned, would you pray for us? Would you pray? There was no problem for me to begin to speak to God and ask for forgiveness and for caring, to be able to get out of this thing alive. But it went on and on and on, and I don't want to tell you too much about it, but it broke me down. It broke me down mentally, physically. I came home when I came out of the service. I had malaria, and I had a mental condition, and you don't know this, you don't know it yourself. But when I came to San Diego with discharge, I had met an uncle lived in Ohio, and I went there to their home. And my uncle was to sit down and tell me that my dad was home dying of cancer. He had us all through the war, and he would not let anyone write to my brother and myself and let us know that he was in this condition. So, I can't wait to get home and see my dad and do some fishing and he told me the news here, about this, and so I went home, and he was on his feet for about 2 weeks, and he was in bed. He never got up, and this really put the blow, and all blows. I love my dad very much. He was a wonderful man, and he would write his letters to me while when we get back and we were going to go to Carolina and do some fishing, which we used to do. Well, I just dream of those things, you know, when I come home and find him standing in front of me and 5 months later he died. The doctor was amazed that he lived. The doctor told me, he said, your dad told me that he wasn't going anywhere until his boys got home. As soon as I got home, and I was the last one, 2 weeks later he was dead. And so this was tough. It was a tough time, you know. And I was single. My mother, you know, my other brothers were married. And so I just figured, well, I'm going to stay with her and get her squared away and find out where I'm going. And so it's, I was in church every Sunday with her while I was there. But I don't think I was doing any praying. I wasn't doing any worship at all. I just felt bitter, you know. I learned many years after my older brother, when I was back in the visit one time, I was riding with him in his car. He gets talking about this particular time. And he says, you know, boy, when you come home from service, you really had a chip on your shoulder. And I thought, dang, you know, kind of funny. And I thought, oh, man. He says, you did, boy. He said, you know. I said, well, okay. He said, but you've come out of it, you know. I said, well, that's good news. But, you know, you're in these positions, you're going through these situations, and I don't think you really know what condition you're in. You know, I lost a lot of buddies. I saw a lot of people shot. And we went through some rough times. And, most guys, I suppose, went through the same situation I did. You know, get back in the civilian life, trying to get started. When I come home, I stayed with my mother about 4 or 5 months. We got her settled. I said, well, I got to decide what I'm going to do. Am I going to go back to school? Am I going to go to work? What am I going to do? I didn't want to go to school. That was so uptight. You know, I just needed to get out. Take my frustrations out on somebody, I guess, what I need. And I interviewed at the Elgin Watch Company and Watchman and Life League and all these different companies, you know, where you'd be sitting at a desk, you know, putting the wires together. So I'd walk out and I said, man, I can't do that. And I couldn't have. I really couldn't have. So I kept looking around and I had a job offer from Camel Cigarettes, salesman. Big western half of Nebraska, and well, of course, that time, what did we know about cigarettes? You know, we didn't know what we were going to do. They were good. It didn't sound like something I wanted to do. But anyhow, I went on about a month, and they called me in the state of Nebraska, Department of Roads and Irrigation, who were hiring engineers. Hiring men to train as junior civils. And the training program set up through the GI Bill. You went to school 3 months in the winter, to State House, they taught about senior engineers, and then you were assigned to the field, you know, for the construction season. And I thought, well, you know, it's outside, you know, I might like that. I'll give it a shot. Well, I did, and I really liked it. It was a great experience and rough training. You had to pass all your written exams at the end of the 3 months or you were out. You had to get a top grade from your engineer in the field at the time you were working there or you were out. And you were trained in all phases of engineering and road building. Bridge design, bridge construction, soil samples. So I do. You want to do it?
To be continued. Want to finish it up next time? Or do you want to stay for another half hour?
Well, how about?
Let's hear it. Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
You want to stay for it? Yeah.
Go for it.
Well,
Paragraph 1.
you might want to go with
Another hour.
I want to time myself, you know, that's, no, I
This is
don't want
unrehearsed?
I don't want to take, I don't want to take,
That's fascinating.
I want to, let me, this is history. This is America speaking right here.
That's right, history, man.
Well, I'll go real fast.
No, not bad. If you feel you have to go fast, maybe we ought to pick up next time. Yeah.
That's not very.
We don't have anybody.
Anyway, so.
I took more.
If you will, you will again.
This is important to the story. Yeah. These stories.
Well,
I know what
it is to me to hear their stories.
It is.
I hope
It turns out to be your
what
story.
you're hearing tonight
Yeah.
isn't a boring situation, you know.
I think it's good
No.
together now.
Yeah.
Not even halfway.
We want to hear about your queen, we want to hear about...
That's what we used to hear all my Thanksgivings. I remember sitting at the table and while we're eating, every year it would be a different story.
This is great. Well, I would vote that you pick it up next week if you're open to that.
Okay.
Is that okay with you, Bob?
Oh, absolutely.
Next week,
Next month.
No,
Next week.
Next week.
Next week. We want to be.
Oh, man.
We're meeting every week.
We're meeting every week, so we're like...
You can take another. You want to take another hour and a half?
Oh, no.
Maybe just an hour.
What time
Maybe
you
an
have
hour.
tonight?
Yeah, about 30.
At 30 minutes. Well, that's about half through.
Good.
Next week.
We can start right away.
Have you start right away?
Yeah.
You know, what he didn't mention is that really there were a lot of cousins and friends that left Friend, Nebraska, that migrated west to San Diego. More than maybe a dozen, I would say. But ironically, they celebrate the Friend reunion in San Diego.
In March, we have,
that's great.
actually, thanks to about 50.
Going to tell it at a place of 1,200 people.
Yeah.
Right.
They're all over Southern California. You know,
Wow.
Whittier, LA, Fallbrook, and some of them come from out of town. Some of them come from Texas and Arizona.
Is he the first to come out?
It's just a one-day deal.
So,
When's the last time you were back there?
I went back to bury my younger brother, not my younger brother, the brother was older than I, 4 years ago. They had a memorial service and burial on Memorial Day. That's the last time I was back.
Yeah, but like you say, you don't need to go back now because most of your friends are all here.
I don't have family back there. I have a sister-in-law and a nephew. And a couple of cousins.
Town a lot the same,
Yeah,
not much change.
no.
Quarter Cafe.
You know, most
all
all
Midwestern
towns,
touches, yeah.
like in the Midwest, they just dry up and, you know, you got a filling station and a store and this. This town has always been so active. We have a hospital. We've had a hospital since the 30s. We have a convalescent home. It's as nice a convalescent home as you'll ever see in any city. A big one. They have a city park, a swimming pool, tennis courts. They have a golf course.
Beautiful country club.
Country club.
It's still 1,200.
You know what that sounds like? It sounds like one of these retirement places.
I hate to tell you what it sounds like. It sounds to me like somebody who leaves La Jolla and goes back to Nebraska and never find paradise. That's, you know, I mean, somebody who's fed up with this rat race.
I'm kind of jumping the gun with this, but I think I'll show you this and then end tonight. So I won't have to carry it back. this will come up later in the story. Many of you knew, many that maybe haven't seen this. My wife Isabel, and she done this with me about 15 years ago.
Hold it up so everybody can see it. It's hard to see what you have. So you used to wear cowboy hats, huh?
Well, this started when we were in Maryland. We had a Western party one time, barbecue and all this, and I had a guy working for me that lived on the Wahita Ranch in Escondido, and I says, I need to borrow a cowboy hat or something for this barbecue. So we went up to his place, and he gave me a pair of chaps and a hat and the whole bit. And so after that, I just, like on the trailer, with the trailer club, I just stick it on once in a while, where Royal Buzzboom took my picture one day without me knowing in a campground with the trailer club. And Isabel painted this without me knowing it. She gave it to me one Christmas about 15 years ago.
I didn't know she was an artist. That's one of the, your second half is going to have lots of stuff about this.
Our house is full of flowers, beautiful things. She was a great participant.
Oh, no doubt.
So we had a masquerade.
This wood is about 100 years old. I brought it from an old mine in Idaho. I made it.
Great. That's perfect.
Remember the masquerade? You came complete with chaps, the whole bit. It was a perfect cowboy.
I had a lot of fun with that, Jim. There's another.
That's what I love about all this whole thing, because you see the person. We judge people by what we know, this little narrow thing right here. I was just thinking about anybody 40 or under just doesn't understand the Second World War. It's impossible to communicate it. Just even as a kid, I would say.
I don't even know where it was though.
Yeah.
Today they don't.
What it was like to see Western Union guys come to your neighborhood. Maybe
What did
because
they
you knew
cross?
somebody had died, and you just watch the guy go down. You know which house is going to stop at. If he stops there,
He didn't just explain that he actually drove, when you're in motorized, you also drive the amphibious, the boats that...
So you drive the landing amphibious?
Your waves of attack, you're bringing in the ships and the boats.
You were operating those?
I think he drove the Henrys and some other...
So you're in the landings?
Yeah.
Well, this way.
We rode in, this was one of the bright ideas. The Army ducks, you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
It's a big hull on a GMC. Well, they decided that for the landing on Guam, that our outfit should park the trucks and take these ducks. And put 105 howitzers in the back with the crew and ammunition. And the idea of Guam, instead of like they've done on the other landings, the first wave go in and they fight, or they and then second wave would come in, and then the third wave, maybe the second day before they could get the artillery in, start doing some damage. So the idea was that the first wave was going to hit and go in 1,000 yards, the second wave was right behind them. It was 750, the third wave was only 500, and everybody just keep moving. And we were right behind them with the artillery, the 105s. Each, the fifth duck had an A-frame, and we would just back up again, and he would hit the 105 and lift it on the ground, and the guys would throw the ammo off, and they'd start shooting, like this. Well, it didn't work that way. You just don't go in and keep going 1,000 yards. So here we all on the beach, everybody's up the beach. And I don't think it made any difference. If we'd have been in there the second hour or the second day, you know, you still gotta work your way. We came up with these ideas. We had a lot of fun when we done so. Further than driving the water with a steering wheel. You know, boy, put your brakes on, you know, you come up alongside the ship, and man, you're going too fast, you hit the brake. Well, you don't hit the brake, you pulled out there with a prop, you know. And
Your brakes don't work too well.
it was an experience. It was an experience. We lost a lot of them. They had bilge. Oh, they were a good outfit. You know, they had bilge pumps. You know, pump the water. It worked all the time. You know, that's great. They had a compressor in front of them. They inflated and deflated your tires. That you could drive on rock, coral, or sand, or anything. It had the gauge here with the pressure for like sand and coral, whatever. And when you knew what you were going to be on, you'd release the air or boost it up. You could inflate and deflate your tires in 30 seconds, one way or another. Yeah, we had after things got settled, you know, we were kind of horsing around. We take the floorboards out of the loading deal in the back, you know, tie a rope on them, and you go about 8 knots.
So the water skiers?
Yeah. Got a board, you know, back there.
Now, all the movies and everything we've seen, we haven't seen any water skiing behind us. That's something John Wayne would be doing too.
Would someone close us in prayer? Continue.
God, our Father, we thank you for this day, for this special day, for this day that we enjoy our lives. We're grateful, Lord, for all the support that we can get in prayer, that we can get in knowing that you are there with us each day. Thank you, Lord, for this group, for the study and joy that we have together. We may learn more of thy way, understand better what our lives should be. God, direct us, Lord, each day of our lives. Give us good health and happiness. Help us to be stewards of your word, that we may spread this out upon the men of our church. Thank you, Lord, for that club, for the men that meet together. We hope that we can grow and have good faith among all men within our church. Be with us now as we depart. God, direct us in our lives. Keep us safe. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for coming here on time next week.
Yeah, really, the start was very interesting.
Anything out of it. Don't steal.
We do a mini-series, we can go 3 weeks if you want.
I thought, well, I was carried away with a bunch of other things here, but as I read through the rest of what I had noted, that I think that's when it really began for me, in a way. Not that it hadn't been. I think that, you know, I thought about this many times, and I think that I don't remember joining the church officially. I don't remember different things of this nature. I just remember being in the church from a time, you know, that I can remember. And it was because of my family, you know, my mother and dad, who were Christians, and we were brought up in a Christian home. And that's what you done. You know, we went to church and took part in the activities and the camps, and I just grew up in that. And I had some great times, you know. I can't think of anything that ever happened to me within the church or any activity connected with it that I disliked. You know, we had music, we had all these different things going, you know, and so I think, and God bless him for bringing me up, you know, that way. And I think that's, and all the people that in my life that I've had contact with, you know, the ministers and the Sunday school teacher, and I can, you know, you remember those things well. And I think when you remember them that well, it must have been pretty important. You know, I had a Sunday school teacher. I don't think I mentioned this in the first part of it. He was on the football team. I was about 11, 12 years old. And of course, any guy on a football team, you know, he was a big hero. You know, you looked up to him. He was my Sunday school teacher. And I can remember that year well, or 2 years maybe, that he taught, and the things that we done together. And it's just with people like that you come into contact with that have made a big difference in your life and in your faith. So anyhow, I'll jump back to where we were. I had finished World War II. And there was a couple stories I was going to tell you about that, but I don't think I'll take the time. Then I had come back and went to what I had done, and then began working with the state highway in Nebraska. And after being with them for a year and a half, I still had the temptations and the desires to move back to San Diego. Because when you're working outdoors in the winter, it's a little chilly. And you're working there in the summer when the dust and the wind is blowing and it's hot, it isn't too comfortable. And I can see the palm trees, you know, in the background, floating out here in the ocean. So I was thinking about it, and then I ran into a senior civil engineer with the state that I had worked for the previous year, and I wasn't too happy on the project that I was on. So he said to me, I think there's an opening with the CB&Q Railroad, and he said, if you'd like to go down and talk to the man, he said, I will call him this weekend, and if you want to go in Monday, you can see what they have to offer. And so I did, and so we sat and talked for a while and explained the job situation and everything. And he says, when would you like to go to work? I said, well, I didn't know I had the job. And he said, well, if the recommendation that comes from Al is good enough for us. And it was a good job, and it was a good future, engineering, not running the trains. I mean, this was a civil part of it. And it was a good paying job. It was a good job, good people to work with. And I enjoyed it. I was enjoying it very much. I had a good future there. But still, the last winter, the winter of 47, we were working south of Omaha along the Missouri River. And it was about 15 below. And I was going down the track one day, and I stepped, which I didn't know was there, was a ditch, and I went clear into here in the snow. And later on that winter, we had gone out to do some preliminary surveying, and walked down on the Platte River, which is a mile wide and a foot deep. It's deeper than a foot deep in places. And we had walked out, it was frozen. Three of us had walked out on the river to look back, at this proposed project. And as we were coming back to the bank, it was kind of cracking, which it does. all of a sudden I dropped right into here in frozen water, you know. And we're 15, 20 minutes, we had to ride on a motor car to get to a section house to build a fire before I could take my clothes off, you know. So I think that helped put my decision quite a bit. But
You're thinking of palm trees then too?
yeah, I'm not leaving. So anyhow, I did.
Just stay chest deep in ice water.
And I came back to San Diego in '48. I had an aunt and uncle living in La Jolla at the time, and their son was at home. And so I rented a bedroom from them. And the good thing about it was that when I left, when I turned in my time at the railroad, the man said, well, you know, these are pretty tough times in getting work. And he said, I know it's pretty tough on the West Coast. And he says, perhaps, you know, you won't come up with something. He said, instead of just letting you go, why don't we give you a 6 months leave of absence, which was a wonderful thing, you know. So I took off and I came out, and it was slow. I applied everywhere, with the state, with the city, with the county, with the various private organizations and the railroad, and my time was running out, and it just wasn't looking too good. And I saw a notice in the La Jolla paper about this man starting engineering from La Jolla, and so I called him, made an appointment, and I went to work for him. And it was just getting down to the last 2 or 3 weeks, you know, me going back. So I went to work for him. We had offices in La Jolla on Pearl Street, and then later moved to City Beach. We were in a the building is still there. It's right south of St. Bridget's Church. I think it's one of these resale clothing places or something now they have in there. Anyhow, we had an office in there. And I lived on Thomas Street, Thomas Avenue, with a friend of mine who was originally from Nebraska. And he had come out later. He was younger than I. He'd come out with another friend, and we opened up a market up on the corner of Turquoise and Cass, and he was a checker in this market. So anyhow, I went to work, and things were going along pretty good. And I didn't have any church life at all. I wasn't going to church. I really wasn't, well, I was thinking about it because Sundays came around, I kind of had a guilt feeling about not being where I knew I should be. And, but anyhow, I was living down there and working here, and everything was going along fine. And so my roommate came home one night. He says, I've met a nice gal. He said, she comes to the store all the time. And he said, I asked her for a date. He said, this guy, he loved to dance. He loved to go and dance. And we've been talking to her quite a bit. And he said, I asked her if she'd like to go, dancing and have dinner and dance. She said, well, I think I'm a little too old for you. But she said, I have a girlfriend who is younger, and maybe I can arrange that for you. And he says, well, I've got a roommate, that he's about your age, and maybe we can get together. So when I came home from work, he told me this, and I said, sure. He said, I have a date for you next Saturday night. And I said, sure, no, I said, she's a nice gal. I said, you've got to go. And I said, well, okay. I said, I'll do you a favor. I'll go along. And this lady happened to be Isabel.
Who's doing who a favor?
So, anyhow, we had the date for the following week, and during the week, I was setting some lot corners that we'd surveyed, and I had a 4-pound hammer. I had a hold of the 3/4 inch pipe right against the fence post, and I hit the pipe and the pipe hit a rock, and my hand went between the pipe and the fence post, so it shattered the bones on the fingers, under the fingers, and real painful. So anyhow, this was like Wednesday or Thursday, the date was Saturday night, so he took me to the doctor, they put some spirits on it, and they gave me a tetanus shot, and that evening I began to itch all over, scratch and itch, and I didn't know what was going on. So I called the doctor's office and tried to get back to me, and unbeknownst to me, I was having a reaction from the tetanus shot, and with the hives, and my face swelled, and I was a mess, and so I was in contact with the doctor's office, and the nurse says, well, I'm trying to get a hold of him, but she said, until I can get you some medication, which will take care of it in a hurry, go down to the store and get some baking soda and make a paste, Well, I went to the store and I picked up a can of baking powder. And when my roommate came over, I think the only thing I do is sit in cold water in the bathtub, and I'm in the bathtub and I got this white paste all over me, and he walked in. And anyhow, make a long story short, I said, I cannot go, Saturday night. And so he called Isabel and he said, well, he can't make it. He didn't explain why. He said, you just can't make it Saturday night. So, of course, she thought, well, we just didn't want to go wrong. So anyhow, he set it up for the following Saturday night. And it's very easy to remember, it just happened to be, it wasn't planned that way, it was St. Patrick's Day on this particular Saturday. So that was my first date with Isabel. And if you could say love at first sight, I guess it was. We dated after that for a while, and the only thing that was bothering my friends, my family, I think at the time, was that Isabel had twin boys, 3 years old. And back maybe in those days, this wasn't, my mother was concerned, because I was going to marry a person with two children. But we kept dating and for about 2 years, and so then we decided in 1950 that maybe it should be time that I was ready, and so it was set up, and why we ever, I don't know whether it was her idea or why it happened, but we were married on Christmas Eve in this church in 1950. She had been attending here. She had been attending herself, bringing the boys to Sunday school. And she was Presbyterian, born and raised Presbyterian, Canada. And naturally, when she came here, she went to Presbyterian Church. And so she asked me one week if I'd like to go to church, with her. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. Well, that kind of turned the whole thing around. It put me back where I knew I should be, and it was a good beginning, for both of us. So we were married, and the two boys at this time, and of course, at the time of marriage, they were 5. And so everything went along well, and then work was slowing down. The Korean War started, and the engineering firm I was with was beginning to hurt because building, construction, everything just closed down. Everything was shutting down. And so he told me, he says, I think you better look for another job, just in case. So I had some contact with the District, downtown San Diego, and And the chief engineer there had told me if I ever was considering the move to come down Thompson. So I headed down that way, and so I took the job, and I worked 5 years, 1950 to 55, with the Naval District. We had all new construction in the district. It covered from part of Arizona and most of California. So it was, we traveled quite a bit. And then the big job then was airfield expansion. All the airfields we extended. So we worked all over the area. I worked at Brownfield, North Island, Miramar, up the coast. We done a lot of engineering over at San Nicolas Island, Point Lagoon, and down in the desert, in Arizona, airfields down there. And it was an interesting job. It was a good job. Things were going along pretty well. And during that time, I don't think we've been members over a year in the church. And I was trying to think about it today, and I don't know how or why, but we became second grade Sunday school teachers here at the church. This was in the old church, the old wood building, it was here. And we didn't have much room in there for anything. I remember we had curtains, and the choir was on this side, and we were in this little deal here with our Sunday school class, and there were other things going on, Well, I mean, it seemed to work all right. I enjoyed it very much. We were having a good time. Isabel was in the choir, and we've been asked to in other organizations in the church, but we kind of, I just kind of held off. Figured that, I was doing all I could at the time, which was crazy. And so then Isabel became pregnant, and this guy comes along, and so that kind of curtailed things for a little bit. But and we
Party pooper. You want to record
I think
this?
Isabel went back at it, I'm sure. And then I don't know, during these years, I don't know just what years, but from like 1950 to 1973, which is a span of 22 years, I'd served on a board of trustees, which we do not have anymore. We had 3 boards in the church: board of trustees, board of deacons, and the session. And the trustees handled, if you guys aren't aware of it, they handled the business, the money end of the church. And that's where I began to meet a lot of fellows, I know today well, and we were serving then, and it was interesting. I had a couple of people bugged me about teaching Sunday school. Verna and Dick Cuthbert, who were busy with the church, and I kept kind of backing away. I just felt like, well, I wasn't a good Bible student, and how can I teach Sunday school if I don't know the Bible? And so Verna cornered me one time, and she says, well, can you read and write? I said yes, and she says, well, then you can teach Sunday school. And that didn't convince me, so she said, she trapped me, really. She says, why don't you go up next Sunday and just sit in the room and just listen, as to what they're doing, what's going on. And we had a curriculum, it was all written out, the lessons and everything, and they had gone into what they called team teaching. They were trying to have 3 teachers in a room to handle different committees and then handle the lesson and all this. And so it wasn't a burden, really, to prepare. You're part of it. And so I went up to the 6th grade room, which is 206. on this side, which had been converted into the session and deacon room now. That was my old hangout up here. 206? Yeah, 206. And so I sat in on the lesson, and I met a couple of teachers there, and Verna was there at the end of the hour, and she says, "Why don't you just take the curriculum home and read it, read through it?" And then she called me during the week, and she asked me then if I would just come in and take one of the committees, And I said, "Well, okay, I'll do that." And so I get into that, and I think I was up there for about 15 years, between the 4th and 5th and the 6th grade. And also at the same time I was teaching, a couple, 3 years, I had become junior department head because they didn't have anybody to fill the job. I remember years back when George and his wife were in the Sunday school office, and the times we used to have down there, it was busy times in this Sunday school.
Lots of kids.
400 or 500 kids.
We had 975 maximum. Ran 3 Sunday schools.
It was a busy time, but we had people working hard, and I enjoyed it. It was enjoyable. And at the same time that I was doing the Sunday school bit here, and the board, and listening to the choir, I got in the Cub Scouts at Birdrock School because of the twins. They reached the age of Cub Scouts, so I got involved down there. And I was down there about 5 or 6 years, I think. And it was a great organization. It was a lot of fun. And then I worked some with the Scout troop down there, and then I finally got out of that. And then I had a call from Roy Capper one time. He said that our Cub Scout troop here at the church was about ready to fall apart. And maybe could I come down and help out a little bit. And of course at the same time I had been in Little League for I don't know how many years. 4 or 5 at least. And ended up being there about 12, 15 years. But it was fun working with kids. I enjoyed every minute of it. All my other buddies were playing golf and fishing. I wanted to, but I didn't have any time. I didn't have time to do it. And so Roy asked me to come down and help out. He said, "Just come down, and try to get things going and see what you can do." Well, there were only like 7 or 8 boys left. So we had a meeting with the people and the parents and all this. And I had a lot of training, good experience at Birdrock. And so I set it up, and I said, "This is the way it's going to be." And so 5 years later, I told Roy, "You're going to have to get somebody to come in." But we built it back up to about 35 boys. And we rolled in and had some great times. Made Isabella their mother. When you couldn't get other ladies to be it, you pick your own wife, come in and fill out. But it was a busy time. The kids, of course, in school and being active with the Little League, with the Sunday school, and I probably came into contact with 400 or 500 kids a week. With all the organizations. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. It was a great experience, and it was a lot of fun. So then Isabel began getting into her artwork and study, and the boys were in college, and so she decided to go back to college and study the same things that they were studying, so she would know what was going on. And it was busy time, and when it got down to where it was Sunday afternoon was the only time that she and I had together. I'd get home at night from work, and I'd be on the telephone for an hour and a half, with league and with Sunday school and with Cub Scouts, and it just went on and on. So one Sunday afternoon, we'd gone home from church, and we had had something to eat, and all of a sudden I'm out in the patio with her, and we're making some projects for the Cub Scouts. And I sit there, and all of a sudden it hit me like a rock in the head. And I told her, I said, this is it. This is it. If we can't have a half a day a week to ourselves, then it's just not right. We've got to cut back. And that was the beginning. To this day, I have a guilty feeling that I'm not up there on Sunday morning. I have a guilty feeling. Every part of it was enjoyable. Working with the kids and seeing the changes, happen. I served once or twice the board of deacons, twice I guess. I was on the session. I know a couple of years after I'd been here in the church, about 52, and I didn't know much about the Presbyterian church. I was born and raised in the Congregational church. There's not that much difference between it and Methodist or whatever. But there was a word that the Presbyterians were kind of stiff-necked and rigid, and I noticed this.
That's racist, but no, they're not.
When the session members would serve communion, of course in those days every man had a blue serge suit, a dark suit, a white tie, a white shirt, and a blue tie, and you were dressed like you were going to a funeral, And they would come in and serve the communion, and they were straight-faced, and boy, everything was serious, you didn't figure you could look up at anybody or look around. And that was my impression of the church. And so a couple years later, I was approached by someone who asked me if I would serve on one of the sessions. And this was a shocker, so I said, well, I would consider it, I would think about it. And I did. I got thinking about it, and I was thinking, at that time I smoked cigarettes, and I drank beer. I didn't spend my evenings down in the saloon or anything. I had a beer or two here and there. And I figured if, to be a session member in the Presbyterian church, you just didn't do these things. And I said no, because of that. I didn't explain why, but I told them that. Well, as things went along, and you get involved and you realize that these guys are working guys like you are, and families that you're raising and all of this. And the more you get involved, the easier it is and the better understanding you have of people and the faith in your life. In these last 40-some years, we have been so involved in this church, but I think back of the times when we were in need, Isabel and myself personally, what came from the congregation, what came from people, the support, it's unbelievable. And we've had some rough times in those 47 years. It came up to about 1973, and let's see, I skipped one thing. I worked for the Navy for 5 years, and then work was expanding, and there was a lot of construction work going, the freeway works was starting, and I was approached by the Army Hazard Company about going to work as a field engineer. And after thinking it over a while, I took the job, and I remained with them for 18 years. I worked all in the county of San Diego, and an experience I had with, it used to be that the construction guys were tough guys, and, guys in construction, a lot of swearing and a lot of drinking and all this kind of thing that carried over. But a lot of the guys I met and worked with were wonderful young guys and raising families and church going and everything. But they were still some had that tough attitude. And at one time I had various jobs with the company. I worked in the field for 9 years, field engineering, and then I spent 8 years in the office estimating. And at one time I had charge of all the final closures of all the jobs, city jobs, city street jobs, subdivisions, and whatever. And I would have to keep track of all of that and meet with the representatives and to close out a job, to file it out. And the city of Imperial Beach didn't have an engineering department. They were too small. So they hired a private engineering firm to do their engineering for them. And this young engineer that was their representative would be the man that I would deal with. So the superintendent came to me one day and he says, well, we're about ready to close out. We had quite a bit of work down there. He says, we're about ready to close out this job. So he said, I would suggest I set up a meeting with you and the engineer. You can get acquainted, and he says you don't know him, and you can get acquainted, and then you can start putting the thing together. I said, that's fine. He says, the only thing I should tell you, you have to be careful, He said, he's very religious. I thought, well, okay. Yeah, and, but this was coming from an old timer, an old superintendent, and he didn't want me to go down there and say any bad words, to this fellow. I met the guy, and we worked together for 2 or 3 different years, various jobs, and just a young Christian man, a wonderful guy. But I never forgot that when the superintendent told me, he says, you have to be careful, this fellow is very religious. In other words, on the job, he had let people know that he was a Christian, and he spoke as a Christian. But some of these guys, that just didn't ring a bell. And so I had a lot of experiences there with that. And so everything was going fine up to 1973. And I'd been having some pain in my chest and my neck, and I thought, well, I'm just getting a little too old to climb these hills and get out of this work anymore. And didn't think too much about it, and I came home one night, and after dinner, this pain started, and I went into the bedroom to lie down, and it was pretty heavy. And I was thinking, well, maybe it's so hard, I don't know. And but heck, I'm young, I don't worry about that. Isabel came in, and she was a registered nurse. So she knew a little bit about pain and what was going on. So she says, what's going on? I said, well, okay. I had numbness down my arm. So I went to work the next morning, and I came home that night, and as I pulled in the driveway, she came out the front, and she says, I want you to go to such and such a place for a while. Dr. So-and-so is there, and he's going to examine you. It's like 6 o'clock, 6:30, and I was tired, and I said, well, I'll call him up and tell him going home, and I'll call him in the morning and make an appointment. And she says, no, he's not going to do that. You're going to go over right away. So I went over and I met this cardiologist, And boy, he talked to me and he pushed me and pinched me and felt me. And this went on for an hour and a half. And finally he said, well, Mr. Gibson, I think we have a little problem here. He says, I think we better get you in right away and do some checking on this heart situation. And I said, well, okay. I says, give me a couple of days to get things straightened around, on the job, come back. And he says, no, he says, you're going from here to the hospital. He drove me and he said, I'll be glad to call your wife and tell her where you're going. And, it was a bummer, and I thought, well, maybe this is the thing I'm supposed to do. So I went in and they run the scripts on there, and they run a couple days of tests. And I guess things were plumbed up pretty bad, 90% here and 85 over here. So they just started bypass surgery at that time. And so he said, after the checks and everything, he says, well, we're going to take you down to the college and it's University Hospital now, but it was County Hospital. The university had taken it over, that's it. And the surgeon was down there, the surgeon. And so 4 days later, I went in the operating room. And, things didn't work out too well. I guess the first thing was, after the surgery, the lung collapsed, and then they discovered I had an infection in the chest, and they couldn't keep me in intensive care, so I had to go in a private room, and all kind of things began to develop. So the doctor, after about 17 days, they moved me to the VA hospital. I found out that the same doctors that I saw there every day were the same doctors I would see at the VA hospital, and they could put me in intensive care. They had a special bed. So, you figure, well, this is going to go on, and we're going to get up and get going. Well, it didn't get going. The bypass broke, and with the chest infection, I was in intensive care for a couple of months, and then out in the private room for a couple of months. Was able to go home finally, and it was a rough time. I wasn't prepared for anything like that at my age. I was 53, and so I thought, well, a couple of months I'm going to get out there and get going, and I'll be back to work, and everything's going to happen. Well, it didn't happen. Things kept happening. Finally, I started coming around, and I started to go downhill, and then they discovered I had infectious hepatitis from the blood transfusions. And I had about 8 pints of blood at one surgery, and so it was up and down, and then I had the chest infection, and they bored a hole through my chest and put tubes in it to drain. They were going to let it heal. The heart surgeon wanted to go in and do the whole thing over. But the lung guy says you can't do it because he'll never make it. I was down to 98 pounds. And they says, well, they let it heal from the inside out. This went on and on and on. And I was back to the VA hospital for about 6 years. About four different clinics. Things were just happening all the time. After a couple of years, they opened me up under here, took out most of the cartilage. It was all damaged from that infection. And then I'd come home and I'd walk, and then I'd get strong enough, and I'd go back in for something else,
Were you working at this time?
No. Wasn't working at all. And so it was a tough situation, but this is the time when you find out what a church is all about. he really found it out. We've known many of these couples for a long time, and we work with them on committees and the boards and doing things, and you're always on the run, we never have a chance really to really get acquainted with this sort of thing. But we found out in a hurry what it means to be a part of the church. We had people calling. At one time, 4 months that I was in the hospital, the first time, I had a total of 350 cards. 350. And calls,
Every call throughout the night.
Yeah, Bob told Isabel to take the phone off the hook. And it was just overwhelming. And visiting at the hospital. And I didn't think, a couple of times there, that I thought I was when I had the hemorrhage, internal hemorrhage, when I was going out, I talked to John West later about that. He says, what kind of experience, did you have? And I said, well, I thought I was going, and the nurse had opened this thing they had me strapped in with, and the blood was running down my chest, and I looked at the nurse and said, what did you do, And then I'm feeling myself, getting faint, and I thought, oh boy, And he says, what did you think? I said, I guess I didn't think anything. I just thought, this is it. And I didn't have much time to think because I was out, And I come to maybe 12 hours later, and they didn't expect me to live. None. And which I shouldn't have, really, But I was in an intensive care unit, and the two heart surgeons were in the hospital, in the operating room right down the hall. They didn't even take me out of the bed. They just wheeled the bed right into the operating room. And they opened me in the bed. And so it was a tough go, but the wonderful thing about it is the faith and the belief. I've done a lot of praying in that 4 months. Because I'm thinking, why, God, why did you bring me out of this, Why when I was 60 years old and the wall fell on me, it should have killed me. I went through the war, and I survived. I was in a couple of automobile accidents that I should have died. So it just seemed like all my life I keep saying, why am I here? Why am I here? And I just don't feel that I've accomplished what I can do and I should do. Things were, after I'd come out of this, things were going along pretty well. And then we came up 1988 to our 100th anniversary here at the church. We had the 3 days of celebration, and it was wonderful. And on Monday morning, Sunday was the last day of the celebration. On Monday morning, Isabel and I were up, and I had 3 or 4 errands to run, and I had something to do down at the church, and bring something back or pick something up. So I'd run down here, and I stopped somewhere else, and I had 2 or 3 things to do. So I was driving up Ingram, and just something, I don't know, God, I'm sure, said, well, I can do those other things later, I should go home. I said, go home. There's no particular reason, you know, this was 10 o'clock in the morning. And I drove up, and a good friend of mine was just backing out of the driveway. And so we pulled back in, he says, all right, so he said, I couldn't raise Isabel. I said, well, she's around out in the back or somewhere, you know. And so we went in the house, and she was on the floor with a stroke. And of course, 9/11, into the hospital, and surgery that night. And she went through a terrible, terrible time. This has been since 1988. She had 2 or 3 surgeries, and I've had her home. Out of those years, I've had her home 4 years myself. She spent 2 years in a convalescent home, and then I brought her home. And then in '89, when I went back for heart surgery again, I've had 4 heart surgeries in between. And the last time, it was a year ago, November, I had to bypass again. And of course, the boys took it by their hands, and she's been put on convalescent since a year ago, November. Torrey Pines, excuse me, Torrey Pines convalescent. It's been a tough time to see her go through what she's gone through, you know. And not knowing that it isn't going to get any better. And I know, I don't think I know, the only thing that's kept me going from day to day is my faith, my belief. Without it, I don't see how I could handle it. One time I was in the hospital for surgery in popularity, you know. Of course, I had made a few brownies because I was laying there reading my Bible. And so, you know, I said, I said, how'd you know I was here? He said, oh, I heard. And so he came in, you know, was talking. And I said, you know what, I've been thinking about it all day today, and I've been reading some of the Bible. And I said, what we've been through with myself and with Isabel, how do people that do not believe, that do not have faith, how do they survive these situations? You know, I said, how in the world can they do it? Because I know I couldn't. That's given me the strength. I mean, it's been a tough, particularly with Isabel. It's really been difficult. And a couple of years ago, I really got down. I was really down, and I didn't care if I came to church. I didn't care if I didn't pray. I didn't pray for 6 months. I just, you know, I was thinking, God, why did you do this to her? You know, why did you do these things to us? And I had a rough time bringing myself back. But I brought myself back to knowing and having the faith in people here. And Larry preached a sermon one morning about feeling sorry for yourself. I don't know the exact title, but those were the words, you know. And boy, he's talking right to me. And it turned it around. Turned it around. It's still difficult. It isn't a life that, you know, I'm enjoying now as much as what I like to, but I have the faith. I feel very comfortable in prayer. I'm still asking God, where am I going? You know, what am I here for? I don't feel like I've accomplished anything great, you know, and it's certainly not enough. And I would give my right arm to be able to be working with the young people today, with Shannon, working in the Sunday school, with the youth groups, and, but I can't do it, I can't do it. But I've had a wonderful marriage, and a wonderful life, and a wonderful family. I had 3 sons, twins who were not mine originally, but have been mine all their lives. They're like sons to me as much as Bob. They're all married, all have children, no drug problems, no divorces. What more could a person ask for? And the boys and their wives, without them, I don't know how I got through it. I really don't. They have helped so much, just taking the bull by the horns and took it over. And so it's but I look back, and think, gee, 46 years in this church, and all the wonderful people that I know and met and served with, it's been a real privilege. It's wonderful to a lot of wonderful memories. And, I thank God that He's there, and I have that strength from Him to keep going. And so that's about it, I guess. It's questions?
Question from the student in the back row.
Number one, I have to go. No. Bob, we can always play back the tape to affirm this, but how many children did you say that you had contact with every week when you were doing scouts? And
oh God, I don't know, 300-400.
All right, okay. I just heard something today on K-Wave, the 2,000 men polled that made over $30,000 a year. The average time that they spent with their children, do you know what that time was? Want to guess?
Per day, you mean?
Per day, per child.
Less than an hour. Right?
How about 17 seconds?
That's all right.
17 seconds a day. Okay, so in a week's time, you touched more children than these parents have. So you say you don't feel like you've accomplished anything.
Plus his 3 sons.
Yeah.
The cancer son.
You've done a lot, Chuck.
I don't think he didn't talk about either. He didn't talk about all the work he did with the people that were going through the same heart surgery you did up there at the hospital. How many people did you counsel and work with?
Well, I left that out, I guess. After
It's hard to do some much, forget some of it, don't you?
in 89, I had been in such pain, chest wall pain from all the surgery and everything, that if I hadn't had a family, I think I'd have put an end to it. And a good doctor at the VA who I'd known recommended me for this clinic. I had no idea what it was. It was called the pain clinic. And I went in there, and I come out 8 weeks later just like a new person. They took care of the pain. They knew how to handle it. They knew what to do with it. So after I finished there, I've been in the VA in and out for 6 years. And I knew a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, and a lot of people there. They knew me. And in those last days in the pain clinic, everything was coming back together. And I thought, I have to give something back to this place. They've done so much for me here. And so I asked the charge nurse there in that unit, where do I go to volunteer? I see guys carry papers around and pushing carts, and I didn't know what they'd done, but I knew they needed them. And she says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I just want to, anything. I just want to pay back some of this. She says, well, why don't you look here, you pay unit? I said, well, what I could do here, she said, well, you can. She said, there isn't a person more qualified, you're a graduate, when you finish here, you got a diploma, you know. And they had volunteers, guys there, and we used the neurostimulators, you know, to stop pain. And we had exercises and all this sort of thing. And take you completely off all medications. And it was a wonderful thing. And so I says, well, if I can help, you know, okay. And, well, I spent 4 years there working. I could catch the bus, the 30 bus, right over the block from my house, and it went right to the front door of the hospital, just like a cab. And I got Isabel out there too. I had her working for a couple of years. But it was one of the most enjoyable things I ever done in my life. I knew what they had done for me. And I knew you could see it every day. There was a small unit. There were only 15 patients in the unit at one time. Every Friday, 2 would graduate, and every Monday, 2 new ones would come in. And so my job was to pick these guys up when they come in and show them the room. It was a self-help unit. You made your own beds. They bring the meals up. You go get your tray, eat in your room, take your tray back. And we had a schedule every hour, every day, lectures and exercise and just everything, you know. And so it got to the point one time, it was a strange experience. Guys of different ages were there, guys from Korea, guys from Vietnam, World War II, you know, and I could see myself when they walked into that unit on Monday morning. I could see myself the way I had come in there. You could see it in their eyes when the man's in pain. And one day the nurse, one Monday morning, she says, Chuck, she says, if you get some time this morning, you think you could take some time to talk to so-and-so? He's having a pretty rough time. I says, what do you mean talk to him? She said, you could talk to him better than I can, or the doctor can, or anybody here. And it kind of shook me a little bit, you know, at first. And so I went in the room, you know, and hi, so-and-so, and we sit down, we were talking, and you could see it, you know, the pain he was in, and nothing, it wasn't working for him. So we talked, and I told him, I said, hey, you know, this will work, it worked for me. He says, you were a patient here? And I said, sure. He says, you have one of those neurostimulators to stop your pain? I says, yeah, right here. And he pulled out my pocket. He said, I'll be darned. You know, and you know, I saw that guy leave there maybe 6 weeks later. He was a young man. He was early 30s, good looking guy, husky, you know. He went down, he got a job with the hockey team that was in San Diego at that time, in the personnel department or something. I mean, he was a well-educated young man. And about a month or so later, he came out, you know, came in one day, all dressed, you know, sport coat and slacks, big smile on his face, had a good job. You know, that was just one, and I saw a lot of them. It was a great experience.
Can we lose anybody?
Pardon?
Can any of them not ever not make it?
Yeah, we had 80%
Success.
80%. There were some guys, say, who were wounded in the arm or some part of their body where the nerve damage was so great that neurostimulators just wouldn't work.
So it wasn't always heart related.
Oh, no, this is pain. from heart or from anything. They closed the unit. The Veterans Hospital is governed by a board of doctors, that decide what's done within the hospital. And the neurologists within the hospital wanted the clinic closed because they figured it was some quackery. It wasn't the neurologist should be taking care of this pain, doing resolving their problems now. And they put it before the board, and we tried our best to keep it open. We had contacts, letters to Washington D.C., and we tried to talk to the head man at the hospital there. He wouldn't talk to us at all. One night we called Channel 10 News. Told them we had a story for them, and there was about 20 of us. We stood out in front of the hospital with Channel 10. We were on the evening news that night. We tried everything in the world to keep that unit from closing, and it just went down. And let's see, 89, 90, about 92, yeah. And it was like September, October, November. And so I worked my last day there, and I came home, and the next day I came down to church, and Vic Brown and Carl Hogan.
I wonder if you're going to get to that.
Well, I didn't intend to. It was out. I got a couple minutes here. I had some great times in this church. These big pots out in the patio with the plants and the palm tree and that. They were on the board. What's the committee? Buildings Grounds. And they had bought these big pots, and they were down here, filling them up and putting stuff in them, And I come through the patio, and I said, stuff spread out all over. I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "Well, Vicky, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call 3-4 guys? We'd come down and put this together. Nothing flat." Well, so I got talking to him, and Carl said, "Well, Vic and I have been coming down on Wednesdays for about 4 or 5 months, just doing a little painting or fixing a door, doing things here and there, I said, "Gee, that's great, So during the week at home, I was sitting there one day and I got thinking about it, and I said, "Isabel," I says, I was going to go back to the VA to work somewhere, and I says, it's not going to tell you what Carl thinks. I says, maybe I can't do much heavy work or anything, but maybe I can go down and do some things." So I started on Wednesdays. And when a short time later, Jim Christian came. There were 4 of us for about 6 months or a year. Yeah. And we'd come out on Wednesdays and work, fixing this, doing this and doing that. And it was very enjoyable, very enjoyable. And one by one, guys started coming, but we're still running average of 12, probably 12 guys. And it's a great thing. It's been a wonderful thing to do.
Church couldn't afford to hire somebody to do what the skill of these 12, 18 guys
I
do.
think of it many times, I think of it many times. I wish when we started, we talked about it a couple of times, that we should keep our hours, down, and work out a figure of what it would cost. Not that we wanted to show it to the church or anything, but just for our own interest, how much money are we saving here? How much money?
Well, it's like several $100 just to reserve or wax and polish a floor like in Calvin Hall there.
Yeah.
$200 or $300.
So I think Ernie Kay told me about a year or two ago that you put in, they figured around 2,000 man hours for the year.
A little better than 2,000.
If you figure an average, whatever rate you want to put a pin on it, that's tangible dollars.
25 to 30 grand.
Well, it's not so much the dollars of one person,
It's not.
the skills.
That's right.
You couldn't hire
Yeah,
one person that
no.
had the skills that these
Exactly.
18 guys have.
Yeah.
There's very little that you can do in this church.
Yeah.
You looked at so many things here. You look at this table up in the recession and the table that Dick
Just a
down.
second.